How can we expect the economy to grow by increasing the cost of business with additional national insurance and rising costs of the minimum living wage?
Right, so obviously this is something that was introduced by the Chancellor, by Rachel Reeves in the autumn budget. Dale, let me come to you as a person who's running a business on this panel.
Okay.
What do you think?
Oh, well, I think it made sense, actually, the budget overall. Rachel Reeves raised £40 billion, and 90% of people in our country were not worse off. And I think that was almost a conjuring trick. It was real, but it had the feel of something that was a bit surreal. I think business can afford more national insurance.
So when you've got some of the supermarket bosses like Sainsbury's and Tesco and Boots and M&S actually saying that these increases would lead to higher prices, what you think they actually can afford to absorb them, they're just not doing it?
Yeah, because look, if you look at the rate of tax that businesses pay, they pay the lowest tax of anybody in our economy. Corporation tax is about 24%, but it's paid on profit. So we all pay income tax, and at the top rate, that's 45%, but that's on income. Businesses get to take all of their expenses out, including national insurance, before they pay tax on their profit. And that's a very special place for business to be.
Honestly, if people understood how badly they're being by this system, there would be riots. The media does the manufacturing consent so well.
Oh, true.
Ridiculous. This never gets mentioned. Again, Panama Papers happened. It was in the media for a week. Nothing, it went quiet. The journalist gets exploded. No one even mentions it.
All the manufacturing consent machine going crazy. Like, they'll try and look at something that is a tax for the wealthy, for people with lots of assets, which is the people who are the wealthiest, right? It's not high earners. It is the wealthy. They are people with lots of assets. Any tax that might affect them, like stamp duty or capital gains or a wealth tax or indeed inheritance tax. And the media will narrow down on like the tiny little sliver of like some high earners who might get affected by it and then act like it's the communists coming for your toothbrush.
Yeah.
Because again, like, look, 4% of the states pay inheritance tax, yet it's what City AM described as Britain's most hated tax. Like, none of you are going to fucking pay it. None of you are going to pay it. No one who actually needs to care about it is going to pay it. And yet we constantly have these really niche corner cases being used as somehow demonstrating that Labour are coming for your toothbrush. And it's ridiculous.
Most sections of our economy will complain, will whinge when there's an added tax or an added cost. You look at the farmers with the inheritance tax. That was a loophole. Why were farmers exempt for an inheritance tax? I don't think they should have been. So I think business can afford it. I think it was the right thing to do. I mean, there was the 22 billion black hole inherited with which to deal. There are problems across all of our public services with which to deal, and we have to raise money somewhere. I think the thing that Rachel Reeves could have done in the budget, which I would have done, would be to balance our tax system so that capital gains tax was equal to income tax. And that would have raised £12 billion a year. And also, if we had a modest tax on wealth of just 2% on any wealth over £10 million, it would affect 20,000 people and raise £24 billion a year. You add those sums of money together, and that's almost another 40 billion raised. It could have been raised in that budget. The people with the most money in our country pay the least tax, and that's not right. And they make their money from the economy that's built with our taxes. So it's right that they should pay more.
Yeah, absolutely.
100%, wow.
Biggest round of applause of the night for some basic social democracy.
I was surprised that he was so forthright in putting forward stuff that was part of the Green Party policy platform that he tried to campaign against for the Labour Party, who are now not doing the things he says that we wanted. But whatever, at least he's putting the rhetoric out there now, because he's 100% correct. He's 100% correct about the fact that we should be equalising capital gains with income tax, because capital gains is unearned income. That's not labour you're doing. If you have these things taxed lower than income, it's an incentive to make your money from being unproductive. And we have a productivity crisis in this country. If you cut tax on productivity, increase tax on the unproductive, the economically inactive, people who make money from capital gains or from rent, then that's an incentive for more people to go out there and do something and build something to be productive rather than sit on assets.
I was about to say the rent seekers need to be dealt with, definitely.
100%. We're a rentier economy. Yep. It's all just inflating asset prices. It has been ever since 2010.
Well, I'm old enough to have seen through these cycles many times over. We've just got another soft socialist government.
There you go. He's an idiot. I told you.
They probably mean well. They don't really like.
I told you. See, that's good. I'm glad you scratched that itch.
That One of the things that Dale Vince mentioned in his bit was that businesses are getting mad at the increase in the minimum wage, which is supposed to be this big burden on businesses. And a lot of discourse online is about how hiring is down and unemployment has gone up, and they are blaming the increase in the minimum wage for this. Now, there's no evidence that this is true. This is from some classical economics groupthink that just puts the supply-demand curve down, flops onto the table and goes, there you go, disprove you. When all real-world studies that have been done since like the 90s, or the majority of them, from labour economists have shown that minimum wage doesn't increase unemployment, because it means that the consumer class has more money to spend on the commodities produced by the other people with minimum wage jobs. So it actually doesn't increase unemployment. Card and Kruger showed this. Erin Drajit Dubé has showed this loads of times. This has been shown by scientific studies, real world studies on these things. So that's just a bunch of bollocks. When people say, oh, I can't run my business because I can't pay the minimum wage. If you can't afford to pay the minimum wage, you don't deserve to be in business.
The profit motive, but they realise that they can't do without it if they want growth. They prefer the public sector, and they prefer things being done in the public sector than through private enterprise. And they're really reduced to almost to paralysis, to standing around on the margins of things, fiddling a bit with this and fiddling a bit with that. Rachel Reeves has made a few mistakes. I thought the way she handled the winter fuel payment thing was brutal. She could simply have taxed people on the winter fuel payment. That would have been fairer. Obviously, the national insurance employers' increase is going to cause less employment. Nobody really can seriously dispute that. But again, she's not a bad person, and they inherited a pretty bad economic situation from the last
one thing I want to
government,
point
from the
out.
Conservative government.
When he says, oh, well, that's going to lead to a lack of employment directly, well, hang on, if you're shifting money from the private sector into the public sector and then increasing public expenditure, this is happening both in terms of taxable income being spent again on day-to-day spending. That's something that's happening right now because that's one of the fiscal rules, is spending the tax receipts on day-to-day spending only. But they've also increased the level of expansionary policy because they changed the rule on how debt is calculated.
Yeah.
Which doesn't take into account like financial investments of the government because they make a return. So you can borrow for certain things and not head up on the balance sheet. And that's mean that they're spending more money. There are some things they're cutting, which isn't good. But more money is being spent in the public realm, more on the NHS, for example. And that creates jobs too. Like, just moving it from private to public doesn't destroy the money. It doesn't destroy jobs. I mean, the money being spent is from the government and then being taxed back, but that's a whole other story. So to try and say that it was going to cause more unemployment, no, it's just shifting where the employment is happening. Now, there's a reason why that the Biden administration massively increased state spending under the Inflation Reduction Act. Unemployment went down and wages went up.
Yeah.
This is full employment economics in its purest form.
I just feel a little bit dismal about the whole thing. We're not going to grow as she hopes. She doesn't really have the instinct, I think, to help make the economy grow, and we'll just limp along for another 4 or 5 years, complaining bitterly and getting nowhere. Sorry to sound so depressing.
But I remember
Also,
when the minimum wage was first proposed by Tony Blair, and businesses...
But they say that we're not going to get growth because we're taxing too much, or there's too much public sector. Well, we had higher aggregate growth from 1945 to 1979 than we have had from 1979 until now, when we're much higher taxed. There's much more public sector before Thatcher happened. Why have we grown less post-Thatcher when we did what you fuckers wanted to do?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's a very, very good, pertinent question. They'll never even attack. It never gets mentioned.
Why is China growing faster than we are when they have massively more state involvement in their economy? They were literally a state capitalist economy. Like, why are they getting more growth than we are? Because they have fucking state investment into things like the tech sector and into green energy.
And the Conservative Party said that it would cost jobs, we'd lose jobs, and it's become a part of our life now to have a minimum wage that always goes up. So I disagree with you that this will cost jobs.
Okay, woman with the dark hair and sort of in the middle there. Yeah.
Question for Lucy. If you're not able to answer the question about whether America will be great again after Trump's term, can you answer whether Labour are going to make Great Britain better after Labour's term?
Well, it would be surprising if she said no, given that she's representing. I hesitate to say, but let me just get a couple more points and then I'll come to you, Lucy. The woman in the red, you've got a red top just behind you.
I feel that whatever has been done by the government regarding people like Sainsbury's, they pay this, that and the other, they are multi-people. They've got loads and loads of money. those little tiny small businesses who want to expand and want to employ those couple of extra people are not going to be considered. They're going to lose out.
Woman here in
I
the
think that's a
pink
good
shirt.
point, actually. Because in the new taxation for national insurance for employers, they didn't just raise the rate, they also dropped the threshold too. Like, I agree with raising the rate, I disagree with lowering the threshold, and something that more smaller businesses were caught up in this. And whilst, I don't have a personal attachment to any amount of bourgeois business, I am a socialist after all, I at least understand the political implications of this, right?
So you're very much petty bourgeois pilled.
I mean, I just think if you're going to piss people off with your budget to try and fix the nation's finances, you piss off as fewer people as you possibly can, and just making it so that there is a group of people who aren't massive mega corporations, who at this point, let's be real, we're not getting international socialism tomorrow, but the biggest threat towards functioning societies and towards regular folk, regardless of whether they are petite bourgeois or proletarian, is the gigantic mega corporations that are swallowing whole economies, because there are corporations now which have bigger GDPs than entire countries, right? They are the real enemy. That's my first port of call, is to attack these people. And if you can't get the petite bourgeois on side against these corporations now, you're never going to gain enough political power or influence to take on the bourgeois as an entire category later on.
True, yes. But have you considered that the mum and pop store can't buy Arsenal tickets for Keir Starmer? So, checkmate.
True. Yeah, 20 Min's Pizza cannot buy Keir Starmer an expensive pair of glasses.
Exactly.
Well, first off, the impact on wages of the national insurance is £17 billion. That's not a Tory figure. That's the Treasury figure. Understand it? £17 billion. And which wages do you think will hit? You think it'll hit the ones at the top? No, it won't. It'll hit the ones at the bottom. You talked about business. Well, big generalisation business. The people who are going to be hurt by this are the small businesses who've just struggled out of COVID.
They're protected from it, though, so that's
just struggled out of COVID. Well, you heard about
so not a small business.
Well, but you heard about the social service business.
Yes, which
then
will be protected
let me
in other
finish
ways.
the story. Let me finish the story. Then
but it's not true. So
then you've got this issue of the assault on inheritance. The inheritance tax issue with farmers was not a loophole. It's because farming is a low cash, high asset business. It's to keep farms operating in the countryside. Yeah. I have a rural constituency. There are farms now who are going to be sold out to big business, sold out to the likes of Dyson, because small family farms can't continue to operate. Now, the tragedy...
Not because of inheritance tax.
Let me finish this. The tragedy of this is the whole Labour strategy is based on growth, right? That's a very sensible strategy for getting a country...
Yeah, they have pressed the grow the economy button, so
it's true.
Everything
Very
will
true.
be fine.
as it were, back in play. The first half of this year, before the election, we were growing. Not brilliantly, but we were growing. The best in G7, as it turns out, but it's still not very high.
Jesus Christ.
Wait a minute.
Just make stuff up. Say it was the best ever. Just make it up completely. Just say we had the best economy that ever existed.
It was the best economy. We've never seen a better economy. There's so many countries are jealous of the economy that we've created. It wasn't growing much, but it was growing a hell of a lot more than Labour would. There was growing a hell of it. It was very growth-oriented, our economy. You've never seen such a thing. I want to point out as well, thank you for pointing out for Ben in chat, saying, why does Dyson like buying farmland again? It was a high asset, low turnover business. I'm like, why are the asset prices so high, David? Why are the asset prices so high? Simple as that, because there's a demand for it to use as an inheritance tax dodge. It's a recent phenomenon. It's why these things had to be changed. It wasn't revenue raising. It was about affecting how the market dynamics worked in farming.
Wait a minute. Let's just be clear, because this is... No, wait a minute, David. That is a statistic that is quoted by Conservatives virtually every week on this programme. Let me just put it in context. UK GDP was 2.9% above its pre-pandemic level in 2019. US GDP has grown 11.5% in the same time. So when you talk about it being the highest in the G7, briefly, yes. Yeah. Overall, not at all.
Well, better than Germany, better than France, better than Italy, better than Spain. I'm afraid, we aren't in the American game here. The Americans have had...
It's not better than Spain. It's not better than Spain at all. That's not true. Again, he's trying to pick this singular month where they had like random growth that was higher than some other places that were kind of in recession. I mean, Germany was in recession at that point. But overall, since the pre-pandemic levels, we are not higher than most European countries, and especially
Basically, they're lying is the basic.
exactly.
Yeah.
And especially not against other social democratic economies. Like Norway grew 3% every single year after they ended lockdown, right? They're 9% above where they were in 2019. And they are a far more higher tax economy than we are.
But there's no way we're going to follow their method.
Hey.
Oh, God, we're shit.
I love how his answer for that was, well, you can't compare us to America. Why not? We're not in their game. What the fuck does that mean?
Hang on, you're literally saying the G7, which like includes
yeah.
America. I mean, you are comparing us to America.
Exactly. And again, this isn't about the kind of political bloc. This is about policy.
Yeah.
This is about what policies economies are employing. And of course, the US is going big fiscal, which is what European economies aren't doing because they literally cannot do so because they are bound by the monetary policy rules of the European Union, or indeed bound by the fact that they don't have sovereign monetary policy because they are part of the euro and they are at the behest of the European Central Bank.
One of the core arguments of the Lexit movement was that you can't really do proper socialism or even really sort of big social democracy under the EU. Which is sort of true, actually, yeah.
The highest growth for a century.
Sure, I know, but you're just saying we had the highest growth. I'll just put it in context. That's all I'm doing.
As I said, it wasn't very high, but at least it was growth. Now there's no growth. Now, the problem with this, to come back to my point on their strategy, and the tragedy of this, is that this leads us to...
Oh, yeah, talking about why we've not grown recently. So I made this point 2 years ago now around interest rate rises. And one thing that's important about interest rate rises is you only really see their effect in the economy around about 18 months after the actual base rate has risen. And then you start seeing the effects of those base rate changes filter throughout the economy. It's why that people kept trying to attribute the downward pressure on inflation to rate hikes when it happened outside of that window. Or within that window, sorry. Yeah, it happened within that window. So it didn't actually have that much of an effect. It was just the price shock going through the system. We're now just past the 18-month mark of like all of the rate hikes that push the interest rate up, which is slowing economic growth. It's why we're seeing members of the Bank of England Monetary Policy Committee looking at the lack of inflation from the inflation figures going down in January and going, shit, we've overcorrected. Now that the growth has been taken out because we are feeling the effects of higher rates, which does slow growth, they're going to emerge and say, well, let's do 6 rate cuts this year because they want to put growth back into the economy. We're going to have to wait a year for that, over a year. But to try and put this lack of growth down to fiscal policy, when monetary policy failure from the groupthink in the Monetary Policy Committee is equally, if not more, to blame, in my opinion, because we are now feeling the effects of those bad rate hikes from 18 months ago right now, because that's how long it takes to affect us.
To a spiral of decline. Because next time round, the Chancellor, Rachel, is going to have to find money to cover the costs that are not covered by growth. And so we'll have more taxes. And so we'll have even worse growth prospects. And that's not going to fall on the rich. It's not going to fall on the big corporations. It's going to fall on the ordinary people just above minimum wage. And that's the tragedy of this budget.
Okay.
Well, no.
We will come back to this subject. I know.
Yeah.
I mean, it might well do, because Rachel Reeves doesn't want to tax the corporations and the billionaires. She could do taxes that would affect these people, but she's not doing it. Well, but the point he's making here isn't that she won't do it, is that these measures inevitably end up taxing those people in their paychecks. But that's not necessarily the case. That would be a choice that would be made. It's not an inevitability. And even then, I think that the rate cuts probably will lead to growth. I don't buy this at all for 1 second.
Did God save Donald Trump to save the world?
Lots of questions about this. So, yes, if you remember, Donald Trump said, God saved my life for a reason, to make America great again. And he said also that he thought he could make the world great again.
I think he'll be an entertaining president. He was the first time round. I think he's gone he's doubled down on himself this time round. He wants to subsume Canada. He wants to own Greenland. He wants the Panama Canal back. And he's threatening a trade war with everybody. He hasn't solved the Ukrainian war.
And not only that, one of the first things he did, because the whole thing was, we're going to reduce prices for stuff. One of the first things he did was get rid of one of the few good things that Joe Biden did, which was to limit the price for insulin. So
it's
now,
so funny to me.
now
that-
diabetics can just pay through the fucking nose to stay alive.
I mean, this is the thing, right? Is that we always keep thinking about Donald Trump as representative of the white working class, when in fact the vast majority of his supporter base are like small business tyrants, basically,
Yeah, very
are
rich
petite
people.
bourgeois people, kind of people who don't have to care about these drug prices because they have got high quality insurance from their high paid jobs, for example, or they're rich enough from being a business owner to afford good quality insurance. But they're also mad about Big Pharma. But they're not mad about Big Pharma in the way that they should be, which is Big Pharma is price gouging the citizens of America for private profit because that's what the market does and they can afford it. This because they think that Big Pharma are trying to put 5G in the vaccine to do the New World Order Great Reset. So it's dumb. They're dumb idiots who have too much money and no problems.
Issue yet, David. I don't think that he will actually, and I don't think he was a single cause for the ceasefire in Gaza either. Joe Biden claims a lot of credit for that as well. But America is arming Israel and is actually behind the genocide that's taken place in Palestine. So I don't think we can give any credit to any American president for a ceasefire in Gaza, actually. I think Donald Trump will try to resist the tide of renewable energy and the green economy, and I think he'll fail like King Canute. He talks drill, baby, drill, which is, he's talking a good game. He's like a talk, baby, talk president, because in his last term, he issued less licenses of oil and gas drilling than Joe Biden did in his last term. Joe Biden issued 50% more licenses, so Joe Biden was more about oil and gas than Donald Trump. I think
you've also been very critical. I mean, you've mentioned it already, but you've gone on record of being very critical of the tech bros, for want of another way of saying it. Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, Musk.
Oh God, I heard a Democratic senator refer to the broligarchs.
They're only bad oligarchs because they are masculine coded or whatever. And whilst I think that masculine coding is kind of cringe, can we actually just kind of put these things purely in economic terms so we don't alienate people? If that's a good, just please, maybe just one time.
Yeah, incredible. I mean, those three people sat behind him at his inauguration. They own more money than half of the entire population of America between them. Their wealth went up. In between the election and the inauguration, their wealth went up by $200 billion. So there's clearly a big business interest for them in supporting Donald Trump. Zuckerberg has taken moderation off Facebook. Somebody said that from the audience.
I mean, what you said, the wealthiest, I mean, talking about them, I'm assuming, the wealthiest are bankrolling politics and media, gobbling up democracy as they go. You're concerned, clearly, by their influence on Trump. I mean, I just want to give that you are also a political donor.
Worth pointing out, too, that part of the desire, I think we don't talk about this enough, right? People talk about Elon Musk and his far-right leanings on, culture war stuff, and that's really bad. I agree that it's bad. And people think about his own personal incentive and wanting to have more subsidies for Tesla and SpaceX and government money being handed to him through subsidy. Also bad. I really don't think that people have properly scrutinized, in as much as we should be doing, the fact that the whole point of Doge as a governmental department, I know I can't believe I have to call a fucking meme, but the Department of Government Efficiency, the whole point of the department is to do fucking shock therapy.
Yeah.
They're doing shock. They want to fucking privatize the post office. They want to slash every amount of public provision. And and you think that the man who has got, the CEOs of Alphabet and of Amazon and of Tesla and of TikTok behind him at his inauguration, do you think he's going to be selling these to people who have the interests of the public at heart? No, he's selling it to people who are using it for political capital on the cheap. This is literally what happened in Russia after the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Indeed, yeah. As to Dale Vince's point there about them taking moderation away from Facebook, this reminds me, and again, I'm making this a very deliberate comparison. But this in Nazi Germany, they had what was called working towards the Führer, which was essentially a self-controlled process whereby you didn't have to have direct diktat from Berlin about how to act and behave. It's that everyone was assumed to be working towards the will of Hitler or Trump in this case. This is how fascism essentially tends to operate, in order to make sure that you don't get on the wrong side of an authoritarian who can enact violence or financial capricious manipulation of the market against you and all that sort of stuff. And so it becomes a self-perpetuating, self-radicalizing process whereby you start to essentially act in a way that he would want you to act, even if you're not being directly dictated to.
100%, 100%. And we've also got to reckon with the idea that, well, obviously, the basis for fascist ideology and for fascist statecraft is that of class collaborationism, right?
Yeah.
Similar to liberalism in that regard, but instead of around a project of civic nationalism, it's about racial nationalism or theocratic nationalism. And so what they are trying to do by having all of these oligarchs and the government intertwined is to make them part of the same national project, so you forget that these people are the enemy. If you can subsume both the CEOs and the working class under the banner of Christian nationalism or American nationalism or white nationalism, they obviously forget about the material conflicts between the bourgeois and the proletariat, between the workers and owners, between the people and the elites, which is why, of course, they have to invent a fictional tribe of elites. That's where cultural Bolshevism comes from. Well, the actual elites aren't the rich people. It is people who are trying to undermine the national project, the ethno-nationalist project. And so you point towards, Jewish academics or bankers or whatever it is, or the university professors, and that's how you end up with the Institute for Sexualwissenschaft being burnt down. And that's what Matt Walsh wants to happen, so that's what he's going to get.
You've donated to Labour, you've donated to the Greens and Lib Dems as well. And Just Stop Oil. I mean, surely on a slightly smaller scale, but you're doing the same as them, aren't you?
except I don't seek influence. I mean, what's happening right now is that...
So when you give money to parties... I mean, some people might
No, I know. And that's
struggle to believe that when a businessman gives money to a party, he's thinking, don't want anything back for it.
No, but actually, yes.
Well,
actually,
hang
that's
on a
the
minute,
case.
hang on a minute.
And this is the problem with...
Why is this just now being treated as if it's obvious? For years, for fucking decades in this country, we just accepted as rote, nationally, that people gave money to political parties out of the goodness of their hearts. Obviously, that was always bollocks. We knew it was bollocks. The people knew it was bollocks. But there was at least the pretense on our media that there was not going to be backhanders or influence being gained through that donation. And now she's here going, well, nobody expects you to get an influence from... Or nobody expects you not to try and get influence from your donation. I was like, bitch, you said we were being fucking anti-Semitic conspiracy theorists when we said this in 2017.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Can we just ask, what are APAC then? Are they not? They're doing it out of the goodness of their heart too, I imagine. Yeah. When they
like Shy Massot, people like that.
Intriguing. Or is it only when there's a vaguely progressive guy donating that there needs to be questioned?
Yeah, like Frank Hester to the Conservative Party, like Quadrature Capital. That got no coverage at all.
At all. Was it 4 million? Donated?
Well, it was 4 million. It's 4 million, and it's not like there's like potential backhanders. It's not like that there theoretically could be some level of influence. We know already they have already gained direct influence, as somebody from the board of Quadrature Capital got put on their fucking climate council by the government. Yep. They were given a direct position in one of their million quangos as fucking a quid pro quo for the millions of pounds of money they received.
Did you say they're also watering down the non-dom stuff as well?
Yeah.
How are they going to pay for anything, considering that was the only thing they were going to raise?
It's insane. It's obvious. It honestly is so frustrating. Again, because literally we spent the whole time when we were explicitly calling this out during the Corbyn years as being conspiracy theorists, when it's just obvious material reality.
The obscenity of claiming that God has saved your life on Martin Luther King Day, when God did not save Martin Luther King's life. He was...
To be fair, though, the FBI have trained snipers, so that was going to be a lot more difficult for God. just saying.
And I have, as you say, I've called him a slob and a bigot and a lawbreaker, and I've said that he appeals to the dark side and the chaotic side of human nature. And I understand there's somebody in the audience who wanted to ask me whether I didn't think that world leaders should be given at least 3 months before we start attacking them. Well, we'd have had Liz Truss for 3 months instead of less than 2 months if that had happened.
Yeah, that's bullshit. What the fuck would we give them 3 months? No. If they're literally planning to do evil things, if they're telling you we are going to do evil things, I think it's fine to criticize them for saying that they're going to do evil things. If they then don't do that, fine, I guess, although that would be breaking election promises, but whatever. The idea that you have to give them time to implement their plans, no, fuck that noise. Again, the Nazis burned down the Reichstag within 3 months of being elected. They knew what this was. They seized power within 3 months. If no one had criticised, well, I suppose it didn't really matter in the end at all. But you need to be able to criticise them within 3 months. Otherwise, they'll have their tentacles so deep it's not going to be really of any use to you.
I don't agree with David Davis when he looks at the things that he thinks Trump might achieve. Greenland, to take an example. There's a deal to be made between the United States and Denmark about Greenland, a deal that I'm sure the Danes would want to cooperate in. But to claim that he's just going to take over Greenland actually makes that deal harder to achieve.
Yeah.
The Green Revolution.
Because the Danish government now have to defend to their citizenry that they're not just like kowtowing to a fascist. If he just goes to them and cuts a deal, no one cares. They're just signing a deal with America. Of course they are. They're NATO allies, whatever. They've already got massive fucking bases on Iceland anyway, on Greenland anyway. So it wouldn't make that much difference if they also set up mining operations as well. Like, it wouldn't be that big, that intrusive. But now he's come out and said, oh no, we're just going to take over. It's, again, I'm going to keep making the Nazi comparisons because I think they're apt.
Well, again, it's perceived revanchism, right?
Yeah,
Both in Panama and Greenland.
Yeah. You're just doing appeasement. That's what's happening.
If God did decide to save Donald Trump in order for him to make America and the American people great again, do the Labour government in Keir Starmer ever think they'll put Britain and the British people first eventually?
Oh, Lucy, I'll let you answer that.
The fuck was that question?
I mean, this is nationalist, all about like the imagined community of America or Britain, making this nebulous national entity great again. What do you mean by great? No, it's unquantifiable, but you want to feel like it's good, feel like it's better.
Yeah.
And that is, of course, the ultra-nationalism that has been channeled into Farageism and Trumpism, these kind of the ethno-nationalist far-right ideologies that these people have been supporting. And that is the whole point of this, is so that people forget about their class disparities. It's so that you forget about the fact the oligarchs are standing behind Trump and standing behind Farage, because they want you to get mad at the little guy, mad at the people you're fighting against in the rat race, rather than to ending the rat race.
Yeah, exactly. Get annoyed at brown people at the border rather than Elon Musk literally owning more than your town.
Exactly. Yeah. Or, you know, or the amount, because again, even if you're a liberal capitalist, even if you're somebody who believes in free market economics and the triumph of small businesses, like we are both socialists, we believe in workers control the means of production, but even if you do believe in like small time Smithian capitalism, these kind of oligarchs are bad for you as well. Like, there's the techno-feudalism that we live in, as Yanis Varoufakis would call it, where these oligarchs control the platforms that we use. If you want to be a small business, you have to send a cut of your money that you make from the work that you've done, the effort you've put into from the effort you've put in to build up your small business. A very small portion of that has to keep going to Amazon if you want to sell on their pages where everyone goes to buy things, because that's the platform that you do shopping on, to your consumer electronics or whatever. If you want to have a takeaway, if you're a locally owned takeaway, tiny little small business, right? You have to give a cut of your profits to Uber Eats and Just Eat, because that's where everyone goes to be able to order your stuff from. Like every single time you try and interact with the market now, even if you have a website, you have to pay for Amazon Web Services. Like these oligarchs, these techno-feudalists, they are the ones who they're scraping off the top because they own a bank of servers somewhere because they have a market monopoly. That's bad for you. Like even, that's where I think that a lot of socialists and liberals can ally in fighting against the oligarchy, because the techno-feudal empire that's been created is there that undermines both workers and the petite bourgeois. So it's the absolute nightmare position. But of course, that's not what the nationalist project is there for. It's to try and make everybody under the national banner.
What steps should we take to prevent tragedies like the Southport attack from happening again?
There's no way we can stop things like this happening. They have happened before. They've always happened before, and they will happen again. And yes, he was referred to Prevent, but Prevent, I've looked up what Prevent do. All they can do is invite people to meetings and ask them if they would want counselling. He might not have gone to the meetings, he wouldn't have taken counselling, and he wasn't a terrorist.
Like Prevent are there to try and deprogram people from terrorist ideology. Obviously, they do a bad job at that anyway, but even if they, were doing a good job, that still wouldn't have caught somebody who was preoccupied with murder rather than having a political project that they were murdering people to achieve. He wanted to kill people for the sake of killing people.
Those things. He may have looked up online for some Al-Qaeda thing. His parents were Christians. He was a crazy butcher, and he was a psychopath, and there will always be such people, and there's a limit to what we can do to stop them.
Okay. Right here. Yeah.
I think it's fantastic that we're having another inquiry, but we just seem to have so many inquiries. I just want to know when we're going to start seeing more action than reaction in politics.
No, we live in a technocratic quangocracy. That's all there exists, okay? We just have to have a fucking committee to have a committee to have a committee. It's just committees all the way down.
Whoa. At some point, you'll have a working group as well. And a task
True.
force.
And a task force to find concepts of a plan for some milestones to fix the foundations.
That's again, I think it seems completely nonsensical to have an inquiry over this. Totally nonsensical.
Yeah, just what the fuck are you going to learn? What could, in the current climate of the way in which, you know, prevent and all that operate, what could they have done differently that would have stopped this?
I think like knife crime in general is a big thing in the UK. I know that it's just been brought in about the 2 IDs to be able to order things online. But I don't know if anyone, like even when I was younger, we used to have community groups that were government funded. There was something for kids to do. And I just feel like, we all see in our areas just groups of, boys just hanging around and they've not got anything to do and they're not going to engage in school. So I don't know, more preventative things from an earlier age and getting them involved in the community is going to be far more effective than just,
excuse me.
finding outlet.
Community? That sounds like some socialism to me.
That's people Marxism.
Absolutely, it's people Marxism. Like nowadays, we don't have community anymore. That's not profitable enough. What we needed was to take those things like community centres and youth clubs and libraries and swimming pools, £15 billion of these assets, and sell them to the private sector. What? There's no youth centres for the kids to go to, so they end up learning about knives because they're stuck online on the internet learning about Mein Kampf and Al-Qaeda. Well, yeah, of course it is, because everywhere they could go has been sold off to fucking private equity firms from South Korea.
Thank you. I think it comes down to resourcing, and I think it comes down to identifying the triggers as well. So you mentioned earlier that there'd been a previous history within a school of carrying a knife, an attack on a person at that school, police visiting the address on a number of occasions. They're all triggers that indicate something. And the proposed children's wellbeing and schools bill that's currently with Parliament, there's elements of that from a safeguarding perspective that is bringing together that multi-agency approach. It can't be done in isolation. It can't just be schools that identify those triggers. It has to be a multi-agency approach, catching those triggers early and putting the right intervention and support in place to tackle it at source.
Absolutely. That's the best answer we've heard all night.
Who let this thoughtful person with some basic knowledge of the situation in? You do not belong here, sir. Leave.
Get him on the panel. Go
What
on,
we
fuck
need,
off, Dale Vince.
no, what we want is idiots, please. We'd like idiots to just spout reactionary nonsense. That was a sensible answer. He has no place here.
You mentioned his father and the fact that he had recently, only the week before, tried to stop him. Now, and you mentioned
So shall I just explain, just for those who might be following, basically his Axel Rudikubana tried to get in a taxi, as I understand it, to go to his former school, and there was footage of his father coming out and trying to, and successfully stopping him from doing that.
Yeah, so, I mean, I work for financial services, and we have to report if we suspect money laundering or we face 14 years in prison. That the child safety bill that went through recently, there was a point in that where you're going to have mandatory reporting.
Yeah.
Maybe that's where we need to go down, and the parents need to take more responsibility. They found stuff in his house where the family lived, so they obviously knew that something was wrong. And I think there has to be more responsibility for the parents.
I mean,
in all of this.
obviously we know next to nothing about the parents at this stage, so it's very limited as to what we can say there. Dale?
Yeah, I think the discussion so far has kind of overlooked what I think to a large degree is the root cause, or a big contributing factor, which is social media. I think this guy was radicalized to a considerable extent by content on social media. He got his
too many phones,
Al-Qaeda
too much
manual
phone.
from social media, his recipe for rice, and he watched violent videos on social media. And Keir Starmer talked this week about the rise of
hang on a
violent
minute.
content on social media.
Did he actually learn these things on social media? Or did he not just Google them? Like, Like, I don't think I was ever seeing people post about the anarchists cookbook on Facebook. Like that shit was in like there was then the DMs on MSN Messenger. The idea that the root cause here is that people were just like posting about violence and killing on Facebook or something. That's where he was radicalized from. I find that difficult to believe.
Yeah, it just seemed like this is the kind of boomer answer. It's the phones.
Too much phone.
There was never any terrorism before we had mobile phones.
Social media, and I think one of the biggest things we can do to prevent this happening in the future is to control social media properly, and we don't do that at the moment.
It's true, yeah, and that's a really good point.
I think
as well. Like,
the platform.
Because we never had any terrorism whatsoever before social media. Never had any violent murders before social media was there. That it may have been, as he's right to point out in chat as well, it's a vector through a medium through which it's happening, but to say that it's a root cause rather than an enabler.
Was run by Musk and Zuckerberg, for example, are promoting extreme content, extreme views. Musk is trying to interfere in our democracy now through his platform X. And of course, the guy got his murder weapon from Jeff Bezos. You look at these three tech giants.
Well, hang on. I don't think you can say he specifically got it from Jeff Bezos. He put it on Amazon, sure. It wasn't like it was Jeff Bezos was doing a car boot sale selling knives.
Like, say you're trying to blame Lord Sainsbury if someone pops down to their local branch to pick up a set of kitchen knives.
Yeah, it's a bit much, especially because like most people who buy knives use them to like cut food with. Usually, like I've got loads of knives. I've got loads of things that could be used to murder people, except I chop like vegetables with them and stuff.
You've been murdering carrots, you heartless bastard.
Honestly, I have murdered so many vegetables. I don't think I'll ever be sin-free because of it.
And we haven't kept pace with social media. It's a supernatural force. It's outside of the boundaries of our nation, but it has a really big impact. And after the terrible event, Musk stoked the riots with content on social media. We shouldn't allow that. He, in effect, aided and abetted the crimes that took place. And that's where we should go.
To be fair...
Okay, let me take a couple more points then I'll...
If you want to... That is a good point about radicalisation on social media. Axel Rodder-Cabana wasn't fucking radicalised on these platforms. It wasn't radical. He wasn't radicalised. He wasn't a radical. He was unwell. He was like sick in the head. That's what radicalisation is towards an ideology. There was a lot of radicalisation happening on Twitter because of Elon's promotion of a lot of this stuff and Farage and all that lot. And they actually did terrorism. They did terrorism in the riots. People tried to burn down a hotel with asylum seekers and hotel workers in it. They attempted to do a mass murder, and the reasons for doing so were explicitly political. They were anti-asylum terrorist attacks. So if we want to talk about actual terrorism, how about we talk about, I think Dale Vince is correct, but that wasn't the question that was asked.
True.
Is Lord Stuart Rose correct in saying that working from home has put work practices back 20 years? Should we all go back to the office?
Right, so
No.
Stuart Rose, former boss of As and M&S.
No, there's plenty of opportunity to work from home.
Even though studies show that productivity goes up working from home.
Yes.
In a lot of the sectors. There are a couple of sectors where maybe it does have a negative effect, but in the vast majority of cases, the scientific information, the peer-reviewed information we have on this is that you see an increase in productivity from working from home. That's something that we know now. My gambit here, because this is not pre-watch, this is now 20 to 12 on the day of release. My gambit here is that nobody who agrees with the sentiment is going to bring up any actual peer-reviewed information on this whatsoever. And what they're going to do is say, well, I reckon you're less productive because I think you're there wanking rather than doing work. There's going to be some they're going to kind of gesture at the idea that workers are slacking off at home without actually looking into any of the literature whatsoever. That is my gambit.
But again, that's reactionary politics in a nutshell. It's all feels.
Yep, feels over eels.
Of course, you speak to the BBC, and he said working from home is creating a generation of people not doing proper work and contributing to the UK economy's general decline. So, Matthew, I was going to ask you, I suppose you probably don't spend much time in the office, am I?
Whereas being a CEO is proper work.
Exactly. As I mocked James Watt for on my segment earlier today. The real jobs is where you spend like fucking an hour a day in a boardroom and then spend the rest of it tapping away on your MacBook in Starbucks.
You can write your columns from home, but in principle.
Yeah, I've worked from home for the last 30 years or so, and for a columnist, that's fine, because I don't need to talk to anybody. I can pick up the phone If I need to, I can do my research online.
Okay,
and
hang a minute. Let me stop you there, Matthew. You don't need to talk to anyone, but you can pick up the phone.
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed before, Matthew, but the thing that you use the phone for
Yeah.
is talking to people.
It's largely a verbal thing. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He's gonna go fucking spare when he finds out what Microsoft Teams is.
True.
You can
Make
hear
my
and see
own
them.
timetable
Yeah.
during the day, have a coffee when I want to, take an afternoon off when I want to. I just have a deadline and I meet that deadline. That's easy for me. But if I work in a business which is collaborative, where you have teams, where people want to talk to each other, pop over to somebody else's desk and ask them...
Yeah, we get it. No one wants to talk to you, mate. Yeah, we get it. We know.
And also, like, going over to talk to someone's desk, again, you just messaged them on Teams. It's interesting, so you have to work in teams. You can also work with teams. The people who benefit from working from home are like software developers who make this kind of stuff that is there to facilitate working from home. And they've produced a product. They've produced a new product that people are therefore buying off them, that they've put labour into doing.
Yep.
Who makes money off of us going back into the office? It's commercial landlords who just own assets and do no fucking work at all. They're totally unproductive. And yet these people are happy for loads of money within our economy to be shoveled into the pockets of rentiers of office space rather than actually into productive outcomes.
But no, it's just because the modern slave master wants to whip his people.
I mean, they literally tried to put webcams up when I was working from home because they wanted to be able to monitor people. It was really dystopian.
How fucking dystopian is that? Why not put a fucking computer? Why not just put a screen in my wall and Big Brother can monitor me 24/7? You fucking creepy bastards.
Whilst you're cycling for your 15 million merits.
Exactly. Well, exactly. You better not be keeping a diary.
Where you get a sense at the workplace of what's going on, what the company is doing, and you learn to meet your colleagues and get to know everyone.
Well,
where you
of
need
course
some...
Paris is out of touch with the modern world. He's wearing a tweed jacket. What the fuck? He's like, are you an Oxford Don from the 50s? What the fuck is wrong with you?
It's quantum leapt here.
Yeah, he's doing some J.R.R. Tolkien cosplay.
Something collegiate. I don't see how that can be achieved by working from home. So I think there are circumstances when it works, but there are an awful lot where it doesn't.
And also lots of jobs clearly where people cannot work from home, let's not forget. Dylan.
I think I disagree with Stuart Rose. I think that's wrong. I think it's a very old-fashioned retrograde attitude. We experienced work from home to its ultimate extent during the pandemic. And that was a real shock in my company. Everybody went home.
It really did. It
Not
exposed
everybody...
the fucking lie. Like, not just that, but like, this is a way in which, like, disabled people can be added into the economy and can, feel much more useful than they've otherwise been allowed to by allowing them to fucking work from home. We saw during COVID the lie that the capitalists put about this. No, we have to go into the office. We have to go into the office. No, it's because you're controlling little fucking jumped up Hitler. That's what you wanted. You wanted fucking control.
It could work. And so there was furlough and stuff like that. And what we found is that there were people that didn't like working from home at all and wanted to be in the office. There were people that didn't like working from the office very much at all and wanted to be at home. And then there were people in the middle.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
As we came back from the pandemic, there
are some people who want to work from home and some that don't. There are some industries where it would be impractical and impossible to do. Okay, fine. But there are loads where just a tiny bit of flexibility from the ownership would allow for this. It's just 100%. They don't give a fuck. Because when they talk about having a flexible economy, they don't mean flexibility from the owners of the industries. No. It means you have to be on call 24/7. You have to be the fucking beck and call of these capitalist bastards. That's what they mean.
That's a really good point by Satnav in chat, actually. But Brett needs your money. I swear down the amount of times I've heard people go, well, think of the coffee shops when people say that we're working from home. And I'm just like, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, some businesses are only suited to certain economic conditions. Like, are we going to have to, cry about, like, the end of the steam engine business because of the invention of the Benz Velo? Like, come on. Like, unfortunately, things move on. And maybe I think a lot of the workforce would be happier doing something far more important for the economy than making coffee. Like, I'm sure there are people, every prep barista out there is going to go, well, at least I can get a job that's a little bit more rewarding than making coffee all day. If the again, because there'll still be demand there. Like the people who are working from home, they're still going to spend money, but they'll spend that money on something else. On their local coffee shops potentially. Their local, there'll be more cafes in where they live that they can go to because they'll be able to work there. And so it won't all be all the same Prets in all the same central business districts in all of the cities where all of the economic activity happens.
Experience of working from home changed their attitude to where they wanted to work, and people have begun to, or did begin to come back into the office because they missed the experience of being amongst colleagues, and actually found that there were certain times of times of the day, there are certain events where you need to be together, and then there are times when you can just work from home. So what we found is that actually what we need is a balance. People able to work 2 or 3 days a week, perhaps from home where the job allows it, and to come into the office when they want to. But our experience of it is that people now increasingly want to come back to the office for the experience of being in the office, but they really appreciate being able to be at home a day here or there because of the difference that makes to quality of life. I prefer it myself.
Okay. Man there in the pink shirt with the grey top.
Yeah, I agree that there are some downsides to working completely remote, mainly, it can be harder to make friends in the office. If you're new at a job, sometimes you can learn quicker if you're working next to people. But for the most part, I think there are huge benefits to working from home.
Yeah.
Personally, I've got a master's degree, so you'd think I'd be fairly high skilled, but I'm in a graduate job that has a fairly low wage. For me to commute to work on the trains, mind you, I've not got a Mercedes. It cost me around £5 grand a year to commute, and I couldn't afford that. So it would cost me around £12 a day. It cost me,
That's
a
another
lot of money
point,
to get in
actually.
there. It's a lot better for the environment. The fact that I'm able.
Obviously, this person takes the train, takes public transport. That's saved them money.
Yep.
Right? That's more money in their pocket, which I'm sure they prefer, not spending money on transport and spending on other things, which isn't just facilitating them making money. Feels like you're making a loss at that point. But there are plenty more people who would otherwise get the car to work. Working from home has probably had a drastic effect on overall emissions.
Able to work from home, I'm able to do some household chores when they're needed, whereas if I was commuting, I would have to add a couple hours a day onto my work, and then I wouldn't have time to do anything after work.
Isn't it those household chores that Stuart Rose is referring to, I wonder, when he says... But anyway, the woman next to you, do you agree?
I actually have 2 separate part-time jobs. One you cannot do from home, and the other one I do from home. I'm sadly unable to work full-time. I don't have the medical strength to do it. But when I'm working from home, there are days when I felt really poorly, but I'm able to work.
Which you might not have been if you'd had to go.
No, if I had to go to an office, I couldn't physically do it.
But what do you think about, you've got a situation, for example, with one particular union, you've got staff at the land registry, for example, saying that they will strike indefinitely after being ordered to return to the office 3 days a week. Do you think that's reasonable?
Well, I think it depends on the types of jobs you're doing. I mean, look, one of the advantages...
Working in the office 3 days a week, does that sound onerous to you?
Well, if you just let me say the point, I mean, one of the advantages, I think, of having more flexibility, and we know that flexibility in the workplace does increase productivity. It does mean that you can retain skilled workers. You're not having churn of workers so much, and you can train them up. But it also means that some jobs don't need to be done, let's be honest, in London and the South East all the time, or where we have high expensive housing, where we have poor transport, as was already said about commuting in every day. And it has opened up, I've spoken to many businesses, that's opened up opportunities in their business to people who live in Stockport who wouldn't otherwise be able to get that job in the company, because they can now go to the office 1 day a week or for a few days during the month, and they can do many of those tasks at home. So we have great talent in this country that's not just in London and the South East, and this is one of the ways I think we can really spread those job opportunities around the country.
Okay. 100%. Good answer.
Wow. Okay, she went. I wasn't expecting it to go anywhere, but he went to a decent place. Okay.
I'd also like to answer Fiona Bruce's question about unions striking over being asked to go back to work. It's their right.
Yep.
They are absolutely within their right to say, you shouldn't make us go back to the office. We prefer it. We don't want to. And if you'll force us, we'll go on strike. We'll use our collective power as workers to get the outcome we desire.
I've only got about 20 seconds. You asked a question. What's your view?
We've talked a lot about parental responsibility tonight and how important it is for parents to be aware of what their kids are doing. If I had to commit to a long, unreliable, costly commute, my son would see a lot less of me than he does, and so can't have it both ways, really.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. Okay,
Very
thank you
good
very
point.
much.
Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
we must end it there. Thank you very
Well, I would
much for
say-
all of your contributions. Thank you.
To finish off this point about childcare and working from home, it's really important if you want to have a flexible future where we're having both parents working, because neoliberalism demands that people must work, productivity must rise, everybody must be working all the time, right? If this is the world that we want to create, and of course, in terms of gender equality, women and men should be allowed to work whatever time they want to do so, and for whichever dynamic and whichever split of the work that they do. If we're going to have people doing those things, having access to be able to look after your kids whilst both parents are working saves money on childcare, and on top of that gives them more time with their parents, which is precious in our world of ever continuing increases in the hours we have to work and the time we spend away from our kids. That's a good thing, but this has to be tempered with the fact that, unfortunately, it's not going to have. It can't just be women that do all the housework and do all the kids and do all the childcare. If we're going to have this thing where everybody is working all the time, we should also be sharing the childcare duties too. Because one thing, the problem with a lot of kind of liberal feminism is that as we've discussed how we can create girl bosses, yet we haven't actually fundamentally undone the gender disparities in terms of housework and childcare, and women have been turning away from feminism because they're being expected to act like homemakers and housewives and as girl bosses, and you shouldn't be forced to do all of those things.
Yes, that's actually an exceptionally good point. Yes, well done.
Wow, the audience, I think in the entirety of this panel, we had like 2 good points from the panelists and 4 from members of the audience. So well done, audience. That was an excellent question time where you answered your own questions, and these 4 talentless bellends were sitting there doing nothing in response. We had Dale Vince talking about the
Dale Vince was okay.
Like, Dale Vince was good on the budget, Lucy Powell was good on working from home, and for the rest of it, nothing. Oh, so fair. Dale Vince called out the genocide as well. So we'll go 3 good points.
Ineffectively, but yes, he did. And
he did. It was supposed to be a very good answer, but yeah, he did say the genocide was bad.
True.
Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for memberships. It's just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.